Box office top 10 this week at Numero Pont Neuf, The Seed of the Sacred Fig, now which you reviewed last week. So interesting email from Saham Hosseini.
Yes.
Mark and Simon, as someone who comes from a political family, I feel compelled to share my thoughts on The Seed of the Sacred Fig. Two of my uncles were imprisoned in the 1980s despite being professional soccer players, and one of their teammates, Habib Kabiri, was executed. One of my uncles was even interrogated by Iran's former president, Mahmoud Ahmadinejad. So there's, as an opening paragraph, that's pretty unbeatable, Saham.
Yes.
First, I want to emphasize how difficult it is to make a film in secret in Iran. Filmmakers need official permits for public locations, and if someone reports them, they face serious consequences. To work around this, productions often submit fake screenplays to obtain permits. Yet, despite these precautions, Mohammad Rasulov couldn't even be physically present on set. He had to direct the entire film remotely, which is why I firmly believe he should have at least been nominated for Best Director. I also want to highlight how seamlessly the actual protest footage was woven into the fictional narrative. While the story is dramatized, it reflects real events, showing how this brutal, bloodthirsty regime has no mercy, even for the family members of its own. Khomeini's grandson was exiled for opposing the concept of supreme leadership, and journalist Ruhollah Zam, who fled Iran, was ultimately turned in by his own father. This is why I strongly disagree with Nima. So Nima wrote in her review on last week's program, and she had she wasn't too sure about what she called the thriller bit of the last third. This is why I strongly disagree with Nima's critique of the third act. To me, it was exhilarating, breathtaking, and above all, optimistic. The mother and daughter symbolized the resilience of Iranian women who continue to stand against this oppressive regime, and the new generation refuses to be silenced, and their fearlessness gives me hope. Thank you for your thoughtful review of the film and delightful podcast, Saham Hosseini. It occurred to me watching the film, actually, that of course, there are no movies, as far as I know, about, for example, Nazi Germany, which were actually filmed in Nazi Germany. There are no films about Stalin's Russia, which are filmed in Stalin's Russia, secretly. So we're watching this film as an extraordinarily, edgy sensation, which you were talking about last week.
It is. And I mean, of course, the story of Jafar Panahi and his, continuing ability to make films despite having been banned from making films and arrested and, under house arrest and all. And in fact, that thing about directing by remote control, that has been done by other directors as well for exactly the same reason, that you're basically having to make the film in secret. I mean, when I saw Seed of the Sacred Fig, I didn't know at the time the full story about the footage being smuggled out and then the director then escaping on foot to Europe, which is a remarkable story. The thing that, I share your view of the third act, because I thought that the film had earned the right to do it. And I think it's also important that, as you say, it has a positive ending. And I don't just mean positive as in narrative closure. I mean positive as in the narrative allows you to enjoy, which seems like a strange thing to say, the cinematic experience of it becoming a sort of, a thriller for that section. Now, obviously, not everyone is going to feel the same way, but both of those emails, the one you've read today and I thought the very thoughtful one we had last week, both said, but it's brilliant. Whatever reservations you might have about it, it's brilliant. I'm so glad that you saw it and felt the same way.
Yes, it's just you always we watch many thrillers and many movies that are set in oppressive regimes, but very rarely do you ever see one which is actually filmed in that oppressive regime. And
exactly.
You know that the person walking past the other side of the street would turn them in if they knew precisely what was going on.
Yeah, and it does also lend another dimension to people saying, "Oh, it's so hard to make a film." You go,
yes.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So if you get a chance, go see The Seed of the Sacred Fig, which was last week's movie of the week. Numero Chateau Lafitte is The Fire Inside,
which I thought was a decent, solid sports movie with a great soundtrack by Tamakali.
Numero Chateauneuf de Pape is Bring Them Down,
which is, well acted, terrific performance by Barry Keoghan, but I think too dark and too grim for its own good. It's very hard to recommend.
Flight Risk is at number 10. Hurrah!
Hey, there we go. It's on the way out.
Moana 2 is at 9.
Still holding in there amazingly. I mean, remember, it was meant to go straight to streaming services.
Companion is at number 8.
I really enjoyed Companion, and we're going to review Heart Eyes later on in the show. And there's a little bit of a kind of stylistic connection, but I really enjoyed it. I wish the trailer had told you less.
Number 7 is a new entry, Becoming Led Zeppelin.
So I'm going to do a full review of Becoming Led Zeppelin in take 2, because I saw it and enjoyed it very much. There's a lot to say about it. So for a full review of Becoming Led Zeppelin, that'll be in take 2.
Okay. But in a sentence...
It's the story of Led Zeppelin up until Led Zepp 2. So from the beginning of the band up until Led Zepp 2. So everything in the pre-Hammer of the Gods era, really.
Right, okay. And Ollie from Birmingham, thank you for your email. I'll include that email when Mark does the review in take 2. Sonic the Hedgehog 3 at 6.
I mean, still there, astonishingly.
The Brutalist is at 5.
Well, I like it very much. You and I have, I think, a slight disagreement about whether or not it earns its length, because it is, even taking into account the intermission, it is long. But I do think it's a fine film, and I just checked Odds Checker; it's still up there with the favourites to win Best Picture at the Oscars.
And number 4, new entry, September 5. Scott Thomas on this email. I very much enjoyed the excellent review with the excellent interview with Peter Sarsgaard on this week's pod, and indeed September 5 itself, which was the most suffocatingly tense cinema watching experience I've had since Uncut Gems, despite knowing the ultimate outcome, which is a true indication of a fine story well told. However, Simon's chat and Mark's review were sadly punctuated by my internal refrain of, "Where do you go to, my lovely?" And for a laugh, ha 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 ha. For younger listeners, this is a number 1 hit for Peter
Sarsgaard.
And not Peter Sarsgaard. Every time the actor's name was mentioned, I'm hoping sharing this burden somehow eases it. I had never thought of that, and now I will do. And it'll undoubtedly extend also to the Skarsgårds, who are nothing to do with the Sarsgaards. At the end of the film, my wife pointed out that despite its near constant suspense, the couple on the admittedly very comfortable everyman Isha sofa next to us had been asleep almost throughout. When the lights came up, they woke with a start and set about their large glasses of wine, perhaps not their first of the evening. Has anyone seen cinema patrons sleep through less slumber-friendly fare? Well, you certainly wouldn't fall asleep to September 5.
No, and I'm impressed that it's done as well as it has, because it's a challenging subject. It's this horrible event playing out and being covered by essentially a sports team who are trying to do news and finding out on the hoof the responsibilities of doing that.
Yeah, fantastic film. Number 3 is Mufasa, The Lion King.
Again, it's done better than I expected.
A Complete Unknown at 2.
Weird thing with A Complete Unknown. Apparently, its age demographic, as you kind of expect, is sort of 50 and upwards. But there are also a not insignificant number of young people who are going to, I suppose, because of the Timothée Chalamet thing. but it has a broader audience than I thought it would do.
And Dogman is a new entry at number 1. Couple of emails here. Dr. Dan Chalice on our exceedingly popular YouTube channel says it is fast-paced, witty, and there's plenty of grown-up humour to make it a movie for both kids and adults. I would definitely recommend anyone goes to see it, even if you know nothing about Dogman. Au contraire, says Robert Neal, and Noah, age 6, and Isaac, age 6. Dogman, where do we see the version that Mark saw? I have 2 6-year-old boys. Daddy, it was so boring, we deserve a treat. Can we go to McDonald's?
What?
There were around 30 in our showing. 3 families left, and we left the guy in front to snore. I am envious of him. Just bereft of engagement. Lame jokes, absolutely no idea what version Mark watched to get the review it did. Least enjoyable cinema trip since my children were born, and I've seen some rubbish. Would actively tell families to avoid it. Okay, so
I'm astonished. I mean, believe me, I didn't go in with high hopes. I was told to go and see it by the redactor, because he said, you've got to go and see it. I said, but there's all these awards contenders out this week. He went, yeah, but you have to go and see this as well. So I did, and I laughed all the way through. I mean, I'm not the target audience, but I laughed all the way through.